show the world what's inside my heart and be loved for who I am. Who is that girl I see staring straight back at me? Why is my reflection someone I don't know? Must I pretend that I'm someone else for a time? When will my reflection show who I am inside? There's a heart that must be free to fly, that burns with the need to know the reasons why. What must we all conceal? What we think, how we feel. Must there be a secret me I'm forced to hide? I won't pretend that I'm someone else for a time. When will my reflection show who I am inside? Will my reflection show who I am inside?
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's great to see each and every one of you here this morning, and it's good to be here with you. If you look at the bulletin, you see the title for this message this morning, this lesson sermon, is TAT. TAT. Now, I want to lay your fears. I'm not going to talk about tattoos. If you've got one, that's great. If you don't, I guess that's great too. But this morning, I wanted to use that TAT to stand for something that I want you to remember. It's something very simple, something that we all know. It's something that in this teaching we already take as being a part of the way that we view life and the way that we interpret life. But it's simply this: TAT stands for thoughts are things. Thoughts are things. Say that with me. Thoughts are things. And they are things. As we begin to recognize and realize that, and to see that how important our thoughts are, how influential and how ultimately the creative power of our thoughts and what it means in our lives to engage our thoughts in such a way that we are intentional about what it is that we think, and intentional about it in such a way that we experience or we benefit from that intentionality with regard to our thoughts. So it's really important that we understand that as the Talmud reminds us, we don't see things as they are. We see them as we are.
Yes.
It's how our thoughts shape things. It's how our thoughts help us to recognize and to realize things. And as we move forward talking about that, I think it's important that we get a hold of that. Bruce Doyle III, in his book that is entitled Before You Think Another Thought, describes thoughts as being like grapes. He says they cluster together, and he calls them thought forms. And he says if you were to strip the grapes from the vines, you would notice that as you move back closer and closer to the root, it becomes thicker and thicker. And then when you get to that, what's called the root of that, the thought form, that's what influences everything else. And the thing of it is that all of us are dealing with a particular root, or the root of the thought form that we go through life with. It's we've been taught that life is something that is difficult and people are to be mistrusted and feared and those kinds of things. Then our outlook on life will generally be that, and we will see people and situations and things in that manner, and we will respond accordingly. And that's why you can see two people in the same situation have totally different circumstances. That's how you can see people who grow up in conditions of poverty and conditions where they don't have a lot of resources and those kinds of things. And one person may continue to be in that state and continue to be in that place, and another person can find themselves excelling and exceeding those circumstances and situations, getting better and being in a place where all is well and where they achieve their dreams and so much more. Same situation and circumstance, but the way that we see them, the way that we process them, the way that we think about them, as Irvin Seal reminds us, it's not what happens to us that makes the difference, but what we think about what happens to us. It's important that we get a hold of that. And so there's some things that I want us to remember this morning. The first is, you are responsible. You are responsible, and I am responsible. And what I mean by that is that when we begin looking at our lives, this teaching puts the responsibility for our lives in our lap. It's not somewhere out there. It's not somebody else's. It's not the devil. It's not God. It's not the right-wingers. It's not the liberals. It's not the Republicans. It's not the Democrats or the Libertarians. It's not, the church down the street or the government institution. None of those things ultimately are what's responsible. We are responsible. Now when people hear this oftentimes, they want to then blame themselves and attack themselves if the situation, the circumstance in their life isn't what they wish it to be. But that's not what we're talking about. What we are talking about is that when we recognize that, and there's an example that I know the one author used, that if you break your ankle, it could be very easy to blame yourself and keep talking as to why it is that I did this, and you know how we do, and I wonder what I was thinking at the time, and had I gone more cancel, maybe that thought wouldn't have happened, and I wouldn't have broken my ankle, and all of those kinds of things. It may be helpful in the beginning to understand that, but ultimately, what it is that we want is healing. A diagnosis is one thing, but a healing is ultimately where we want to have our minds, where we want to have our focus, where we want to see things when it comes to the responsibility that we have. We want to be able to do that in such a way that we become diligent in our thoughts. It's important that we recognize that. It's important that we approach life in this manner. In a manner in such a way that we, each day, are aware of our thoughts. Each day we are diligent about what it is that we think. As Louise Hay likes to remind us, that we stand as the guardian to the doorway of our minds. We are constantly being aware of our thoughts. Our thoughts generate what happens in our lives. Our thoughts are those kinds of things, so we become diligent about that. Each day. We know the scripture that reminds us that this is the day that God has made, that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. We started out this morning, we were trying to pull some of y'all along. I start my day with love. I start my day with peace. I start my day with joy. There are a few people that were I'm saying, come on, start your day with us. Start it with love. Start it with peace. Start it with joy. It may not have been well last night. There may be many things that concern us, but ultimately, we can still approach it from a situation of knowing that this is the best day. This is a day that is full of promise, potential, and possibility. This is a day, a brand new day. This is a day that we have another opportunity to be able to do all of those things that we wish to experience and wish to have. Then when we do that, we begin to recognize that It's about our consciousness, because thoughts are the building blocks to our consciousness. And our consciousness can cause us to do a lot of things. How many of you have done this? And you know, they tell us not to do it this way, but how many of you have ever gone to the grocery store hungry? And what happens? You buy everything, you buy stuff you don't even like because you're hungry. I mean, stuff that you're not going to eat, you end up throwing it out, or, you know, wondering, what was I thinking? What you were thinking was you were hungry, how hungry I am, and how good that looked, and the fact that, you know, the marketers know that, and they know that if they could get you in the center aisles of the grocery store, they got you. And then they got coupons, and then if you go on certain days, they even have samples. And you come out of there, you have the intention that I'm just going to go in here and get a few things, and you come out of the store with a whole lot of other things. Because our consciousness is in the driver's seat. But it's in the driver's seat because the building blocks that we use, we were not diligent and we were not careful about that. Or it could be, you know, it might not be something like that, but it could be fear, that we find ourselves in situations and we act out of fear. And we do things that we wish we hadn't done. Or in a state of anger, we say things and we do things because, again, that whole driver's seat, the consciousness being there, that we're not diligent, not using our thoughts to help us recognize how important it is. And I'm one, and you've heard us say this over and over again, about the atmosphere. As Ernest Holmes talks about the mental atmosphere that we allow ourselves to be in, and that we create for ourselves, the things that we have around us, the people that are there, that we are friends with, the conversations that we have. All of that goes a long way into shaping our thoughts and shaping our lives and shaping our day. And I say all of this about consciousness and awareness and those kinds of things because I'm sure, like many of you, that this week we were looking with, in many ways, disbelief, and then with horror and with other things about the situation that happened in Boston with the bombings of the Boston Marathon, and then the subsequent search for the people who were responsible. If you were even more astute and more alert, understanding that on that same day across the world there were other bombing incidents, and then daily people losing their lives to violence and those kinds of things there. And for me, a part of all of that is the fact that we can so often get into a place where we see people as means to an end rather than ends of themselves. Yes. Means to an end, so we get caught up in ideologies and objectifying people in such a way that then it becomes very easy to perpetrate violence on another person because we don't even see them as a person. Yes. We see them as enemies, or as something that is opposed to us, or something that opposes a danger or somebody else. And then we lose the fact of recognizing the divinity in one another. And when we lose that, then we get ourselves on a path that these kinds of things can happen. And people say, well, you know, I didn't think something like that could happen here. It can happen anywhere. Anytime we forget who we are. Yes. Anytime we are not consciously recognizing and realizing what we say here and what we do here each week. I greet you. I bless you. I see God in you. For when we see God in one another, when we recognize that, even if that person's not acting from their place of divinity, and we know a lot of people in our lives that are not necessarily acting from their place of divinity, but it's okay. Because when we take the lead, when we are the ones who take the initiative, when we take the thought that is necessary in those places, we become the light, we become the example. We we become that. And it's no accident, I think, that this morning, as I listened to the things that were being said and the things that happened, we started out the meditation this morning with what I like to call the open heart meditation, where we found a place of joy in ourselves, and then we let that light come out from us and go out of this room and encounter people all over. And in that light was a healing aspect and all of that. And then we had the songs that we did today, and in the fellowship time that we had, in the affirmative reading that we had, in the centering moment that we had. It was all about letting the best of who we are shine, the best of who we are come out, the best of who we are emanate from us, so that we can make a difference. That's ultimately what's going to change things in our world. You and I are the agents of change. You and I. And the thing I was thinking about that, you know, what audacity we must have to think that here in this space, in this place, the handful of us that are gathered here could make a difference.
Yes.
But you know what? If you understand the whole concept of history, and if you want to take it from a biblical perspective, it never was a situation about numbers and about a majority. It never was a situation about having huge crowds or all of those things. It was about people who understood who they were, who understood the truth, who understood the essence and the best of life expressing itself. That's why when we look at Jesus as the great example, the way shower, because he recognized ultimately the divinity that was in him. Now, some people took that understanding he had and made him the object of worship rather than the object to follow, or the person to follow, or the example to follow. But he in and of himself recognized and realized that each person he saw, I remember asking the question several times, and other people have asked it too, that if you look at the biblical narrative and of Jesus' ministry and life and all of that thing, and ask the question, how many prostitutes did Jesus meet? And people start thinking, the answer is none. How many thieves did Jesus meet? The answer is none. How many criminals did Jesus meet? The answer is none. Because the people that he met may have lived lives in that manner, but that wasn't who they were. And a part of his genius was to see people not in the way that they were acting, but for who they were. That's why he could say things to them like, you know, you are better, you know, I'm paraphrasing, you are better than this, go and sin no more. In other words, go and don't miss the mark or miss the truth of who you are anymore. Live from that truth. And that's what we're talking about today. The fact that thoughts are things. That we can live from the truth of who we are. That all of the other stuff that wants to distort that, all of the other rhetoric, all of the stuff that is going on. I mean, you know, the Twitterverse and social media and the news channels and all that were going crazy this week. And if you were not centered, and if you were not focused, it would be just like, you know, as I say oftentimes when you think about thoughts and those kinds of things, it's like a bus, one going this way and one going that way, and you hop on that bus for a while, and it takes you here over there with fear, and then you get off of that one, and it takes you over to that one with disbelief, and you hop on that one with doubt, and it will take you anywhere. Because if you're not sure and intent on where it is that you want to go, any road, any bus will take you. So when we become intentional, when we recognize the creative power of our thought, and all we are doing is replicating what God does. What God does. Replicating what God does. On a macro level, God is constantly creating this day. It's moving into spring now. I know it felt more like it a couple of days ago. We're moving into spring in this hemisphere. The fact that what looked dormant and looked dead just a few weeks and months ago is getting green and is growing and is blossoming.
Yes.
All of that. In our lives, things that might have looked hopeless and dead and dormant, that are now growing. And every day, we've got a new opportunity to create the life that we wish to live, to be the people that we wish to be, to have the joy that we wish to have the peace that is ours, that centers us, to have the abundance that is there. Abundant, not just in terms of resources and finances, but abundant friends, abundant health, to be able to laugh, to be able to, you know, appreciate everything that is there. That is what we mean when we say TAT, T-A-T. Thoughts are things. And as Mike Dooley says, choose good ones.
All right.
And so it is.